My name is John Passfield, and the title of this video will be The Mammoth Cheese, Video 4, The Folk Tales. This is my novel, James McIntyre, The Mammoth Cheese, a photo by John Passfield, an historical photo of the Mammoth Cheese of Ingersoll, Ontario. Here's the summary on the back of the novel. With a contribution of 800 cows, the tiny village of Ingersoll, Ontario, Canada, has not only produced the world's largest block of cheese, it has also nurtured the epic poet who can rapturously sing its praises. Now, if only Queen Victoria can be persuaded to take a hearty bite and add her majestic voice to the poet's ecstatic hymns of praise, the mammoth cheese will become the edible jewel in the crown of the globe-girdling British Empire. So, to make this cheese the most important cheese, the most desired cheese in the British Empire, is the quest of the people of the village of Ingersoll, Ontario, Canada at this time. In this video, I'm going to read the folk tales. Folk tales have been around for centuries, perhaps for as long as we humans have been on the earth. I would define folk tales as the bare bones presentation of an idea. In my recent novels, the main character uses the image category of a folktale to reduce the lives of some of the people that he or she has known to the bare bones level, in an effort to illuminate the basic elements of his or her own life. In this novel, the main character, James McIntyre, allows himself 16 image units, one per chapter of thought, to summarize the lives of his fellow writers. Just for fun, I will not name each writer, till after I've read his folk tale. For brevity's sake, though, I'll read just 6 of the 16 image units for each poet. So he gives himself 16 chapters of thought. Just one layer of imagery in each chapter of thought is of these folk tales, but I'm only going to read 6 of them. So here's the first folk tale. In his mind, a boy was born in London. Well, if you're thinking of British poets, that probably gives you a lot of possibilities. Let's go to chapter 2 then, page 10, for the second interment. So that's a whole chapter of thought with only one line in it about this poet, and yet this poet might be interesting when he compares and contrasts his own life, the life of James McIntyre, with this poet. Here's the second increment. What was the great work that he was born to write? What was the great undertaking that all of his faculties throbbed to create? He would dedicate himself to this great endeavor. He would become the great poet that he felt he was born to be. Every tick of his watch was a burr that would spur him on. Well, that might suggest a lot of poets too, eh? A young poet eager to get going on his career, write the great poems, and become the great poet that he knows, he feels it in him, he can be. Here's another one. The family of a poet, madmen, sailors, ladies, and lords, marriage for money, a ruined estate, brutal tempers, tremendous remorse, a death from tuberculosis, and a broken heart. So that's 3 of the 6 increments I'm going to read, image units I'm going to read. Any idea who that poet might be when you reduce his life to bare bones, to the bare bones level? Descendant of kings and suicides, borrowed money, massive debts, flights from creditors, unhobbled legs, a father dead, an uncle insane, a childhood thoroughly soaked in poetical lore. So lots to write about if you're a poet, and that's your particular life. Let's go to page 34 in chapter 5 to learn more about this poet. Becoming a noble, inheriting an abbey, running through life on deformed limbs, wicked and selfish like his uncle, living in luxury without a dime to his name. Well, that's 5 increments. Let's go to page 42. And we'll get the 6th of 16, but the last one I'm going to read, falling in love and yearning madly, writing poems of hope and despair, boxing, riding, gambling, drinking, quaffing liquor from a skull, applying the whip to the foaming hide of the horse of life. So, deformed legs, drinking wine or liquor from a skull. A little pause here, and then I will name the poet. That was The Bare Bones of a Life of Lord Byron. Okay. Well, let's go back to page 4. He compares, does James McIntyre himself, to a number of very successful poets in the past. Of course, he's hoping to become a very successful poet in the future. He's working on his own career. Here's the second poet. A boy was born in Broadbridge Heath. Well, that's a little narrower than born in London, but you may or may not have an idea of which great British poets were born in Broadbridge Heath. Here's the second installment of this bare bones summary folktale. What was the great work that he was born to write? What was the great undertaking that all his faculties throbbed to create? He would dedicate himself to that great endeavor. He would become the great poet that he felt he was born to be. Every tick of his watch was a burr that would spur him on. Well, that sounds very similar to young Byron. And this young poet has the same kind of drive, ambition, and recognition of talent in himself, and same dedication to his own future. Okay, let's go on then. Born a duke, or an earl, or at least a baronet, disagreed with England's ancient social divide. Handed out pamphlets on street corners. God is an atheist, so am I. Wrote poems of exquisite beauty, the birds and the wind. So, some clues there as to who this might be. That was page 19. Now we go to page 27 in chapter 4 for another installment of this mystery poet's folktale. Married a girl, but didn't love her. Fell in love with her circumstance. Fell in love with someone else. Now she was worse than when she was rescued by the poet. Drowned herself in the Serpentine. Well, if you know your English poets, that might be a clue as to who this is. 35 is in the next chapter. There was a lady who was dead. Left a book with great ideas. Also left behind a daughter. So he married the daughter instead. Carried on her work in changing humankind. Well, that's 5. So here's the last one I will read for this mystery poet. Although there are 16, this is the 6th and last I will read. Send his poems to a great poet. Hope to be welcome to the club. Never heard a word. In response, the great man never cut a page. Is an unread poem dead or just asleep? So that's the 6th I'm going to read. So the poet to whom this fellow sent his book of poetry when he was starting out was Wordsworth. Wordsworth died later on, and on his shelf was this book with uncut pages, including this particular book was of the young poet's early output. Okay, that was Shelley. Okay. Here's the third of the 4 I'm going to read. We go right back to page 6 for this one. Page 6. A boy was born in Moorgate. So I don't know whether that's a clue. Well, it's a clue. Is it a good clue? Is it a clue that works for you as you listen to this? Here's the next one, if I just find it here. Okay. What was the great work that he was born to write? Sound familiar? What was the great undertaking that all his faculties throbbed to create? He would dedicate himself to that great endeavor. He would become the great poet that he felt he was born to be. Every tick of his watch was a burr that would spur him on. So is the mind of James McIntyre thinking that all young poets are very, very similar? They all have that same sense that it's all inside them. They just have to get it out on the page. Okay, let's find the next one. And here it is for this particular poet. Okay. Born in a stable, humble it was, father died of a fractured skull, left a legacy that he was never to collect, lived in poverty all his life, as poets have done. Well, I don't know whether living in poverty distinguishes him from all the other poets. Many poets, I guess, have lived in that way, have lived at that economic level. Here's another one. He was drawn towards the paper. He was drawn towards the pen, had the urge to turn his heart blood into ink. Read of Homer, read of Chapman, wrote of both of them, and also Cortez, though by mistake. Well, that should be a giveaway. Let's go to the next one, which will be this one. Setting his chair outside on the lawn, pen and paper close at hand, having some thoughts about a nightingale, capturing sentiments and words. Oh, to fly along with the nightingale above the sky. And the last one, if that hasn't given the final clue that was needed, here is another clue, the last one I'm going to read. Seeing the marbles in the museum, writing of love both found and lost, heifers lowing and young girls running, young boys chasing them around a vase. If only we had immortality like the gods. Well, I assume most people would be able to guess that that folktale is the bare bones version of the life of John Keats. Okay, the fourth one I'm going to read. We go back to page 7, and here it is. So this is the first increment in the folktale of this particular poet. A boy was born in Bristol. Well, okay, if you know your English poets, how many were born in Bristol? Let me find the next one. Here it is. What was the great work that he was born to write? What was the great undertaking that all of his faculties throbbed to create? He would dedicate himself to that great endeavor. He would become the great poet that he felt he was born to be. Every tick of his watch was a bird that would spur him on. So great similarities among these young poets, at least in the mind of our main character. And the question is, will he become one of them if he sees himself as equally potentially great and works as hard as they did to become great? Born of a father who died before childbirth, before the boy could establish his birth. Born of a mother who took in sewing and needlework. Born of people who could barely read and write. However, he had an uncle who was sexton of a church. So that's page 22. We're looking for page 29. Okay, and here it is. So why are these so far apart, of course? Because they're interlayered with other imagery. All of the imagery of James McIntyre's life is available with which to think, and in each case, 2,500 to 3,000 words of imagery is in each chapter of thought, and these short items are one in each chapter. So they're interlayered with many, many other images, and images illuminate one another. They also darken one another. You know, a tree will allow another tree to get some sunshine, but it would also shade out another tree. You know, images are natural, and they act in natural ways. The books he read were the words on gravestones, rolls of parchment, and forgotten old trunks, an ancient Bible in which the pictures served for words, ancient writings on old oaken chests, laid there centuries ago by ancient hands. Okay, from 29 we go to 38. So only two more clues for this particular poet of the past. Moving to London to find a patron, moving to London to make his way. His way was barred by the walls of indifference. His was the way of mangled hope and lost despair. Lie down in the streets and starve to death, for all we care. Excuse me, I'll clear my throat before I read the last one on page 45. Starving in a garret, not a crumb to eat all day, hungry for books, not meat and potatoes. Ink and paper were his mainstay. He ate with his eyes, not with his mouth. So Born in Bristol, starving in a garret in London. That must be Thomas Chatterton. So all of these people who have become famous, Chatterton, of course, had less time. He died at 17, and the others, Keats and Shelley and Byron, all died young as well. But nevertheless, all made their name. And he, of course, thinks of them when he thinks of making his own name in a similar way. Or his own way, I guess you'd say. Well, here's the conclusion. Now, I have a challenge for you. What would you write if you were to write a bare-bones folk tale of your own life? James McIntyre allows for his own folk tale 1 sentence per chapter for 16 chapters of thought. You could reduce your personal folk tale to 10 sentences if you like. That might be a little more easy to handle. 10 sentences, single sentences, from birth to now that summarize your life in a bare-bones way. Here's the first line of James McIntyre's folk tale. It starts in chapter 1 on page 5. There was a boy who was born in Foray, Scotland, and emigrated to Upper Canada and settled in Ingersoll. So a lot of detail in there, but all factual and all at the beginning of his life. So start with 1 sentence on your place of birth. There was a girl or boy who was born in blank, probably a city, and end with your present situation. Now, I wrote one for myself, for my own novel, John Pasfield, Saturday Morning, a novel by John Pasfield. Now, all my novels have me on the bottom here, bottom line as the author, but only one has me up here as a character, a main character. So in that novel, I wrote as the author, I thought as the main character, a folktale, a single line folktale in each chapter. And it starts as there was a boy who was born on Oak Street. Could have started as there was a boy who was born in St. Thomas, because that's the city I was born in, but it goes on from there. So try it. 10 lines, single lines, that summarize your life up to the present. And then perhaps end with a question, where will this person go from here? Okay, having read all of that, I'll simply say this again is the novel, James McIntyre, The Mammoth Cheese, a novel by John Pasfield. There's more information on Amazon. There's more information at Rocks Mills Press, ROCKSMILLSPRSS.com. That's my publisher's website. More information at johnpasfield.ca, all one word, JOHNPASSFIELD.ca, in the form of 2 free books, a planning notebook, in which I plan and write the novel, and a journal in which I reflect on what I've accomplished and where I will go from here as a novel writer. So lastly, I'll say thank you for watching this video.